I did it! I went to Kenya! It was amazing! Wow! If you're Kenyan, you already knew it would be. The rest of you, I bet you have a ton of questions. Stay tuned and learn exactly how I did it. I can't believe my Kenyan trip is already over. It was by far the most awe-inspiring trip I've ever had. I've been trying to put my finger on what it is, and what I've come up with so far is, it was the most natural and authentic living I've ever experienced. Sure, I experienced plush accommodations, spas, and fancy dining, but what sparked joy the most were the many tuk-tuk rides, the early morning walks on the beach, the cows walking the streets, the fresh coconuts each morning, the awesome school children in their fancy uniforms walking to school, the breathtaking wildlife on the safari. I'll get into every aspect of my trip in a series of videos, but first, let me start with how I planned and prepared for my Kenya vacation. I need to preface this is how I planned my trip to Kenya. There are many ways to plan a Kenyan trip, and this is how I did it. I will be sure to call out what I will do differently the next time I visit Kenya. Oh yeah, I will be visiting again and again and again. Here's what we're getting into today. Visas, flight bookings and screw-ups, and there were many. Vaccinations, packing, and the dogs. And I'll give you a glimpse into some of my Malindi stays. Hopefully, this will answer a lot of questions that you might have, and most importantly, help you avoid make some of the mistakes that I made. Let's get into it. Let's talk visas. This is international travel, so the first thing I wanted to find out was, do I need a visa to visit Kenya? I Googled it and found the official Kenyan eVisa website, and I put the link in the description. Guys, it was so easy. I filled out an online application, paid $51, and within 2 business days, my eVisa was issued. The eVisa allows me to stay in Kenya for up to 3 months. But be sure to book your flights and your accommodations before you apply for the eVisa, because the application actually asks you for that information. Warning, at the US airport, the agent at the check-in counter was so confused because she didn't see the words approved on the eVisa. Be prepared to educate them. I highly recommend that you print your eVisas and all your travel documentations before you get to the airport. Kenya scanned everything. Kenya 1, US 0. Honestly, I was glad that Kenya requires US citizens to get e-visas. As US citizens, we're used to just doing whatever we want and flashing our passport. But it was nice to see that Kenya had some restrictions in place for US citizens to enter their country. Now, let's talk flights. So you're probably wondering what could have gone wrong with what seems to have been the most perfectly executed vacation. Plenty. Can you believe my trip's departure date got pushed by an entire day? Here I am, ready to go on vacation, and I have to wait over a day to leave New York. I was livid, and I did everything I could to claw back that one day, but to no avail. You see, I shopped around for the best deal, which required that I do a layover in Amsterdam. Apparently, there were some issues with the Amsterdam to Nairobi leg of my trip. Blah, blah, blah. I could get from JFK to Amsterdam, but there was some story given about the second leg of that trip. I'm not buying it for a second. I tried for days to get my original departure flight since there were no express issues with that first leg, and I figured I could just stay over for one night in Amsterdam. I left many requests with various agents who vowed to escalate the matter urgently, but nothing really was ever done about it. That leads me to conclude that the airline was simply trying to save money, or they didn't have their act together. Regardless, it left me with a really bad taste in my mouth with this airline, who shall remain nameless, because I vow not to disparage anything or anyone on this channel, and just highlight what works well. Okay, let me tell you about my solution. Fly to Nairobi direct. Fly Kenya Airways. Kenya Airways and I are about to become besties. It's my understanding that Kenya Airways is the only airline that flies directly from JFK to Nairobi. Done. If you're a frequent flyer from JFK to Kenya, I would love to hear about your experiences. So if my departure delay wasn't enough, a few days before my new departure date, my flight from Nairobi to Malindi got canceled. Why? Luckily, I was able to get it rebooked right away, this time going through American Express. And it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because I had planned to fly back from Malindi to Nairobi. That was a silly idea because I had planned on spending my final week in Diwani, which is 4 hours south of Malindi. Rookie mistake on my part, because I didn't know much about Diwani Beach. I ended up booking a flight from Mombasa to Nairobi. The Mombasa airport is only 50 minutes away from Diwani Beach. Solution: you should only plan on flying to Nairobi from Malindi, Diwani Beach, or Mombasa. For those who plan on visiting Lamu from Malindi, you can also fly from Lamu to Nairobi. Let's talk about vaccinations. This was concerning because I heard of a lot of scary requirements when planning to visit Kenya. I called my doctor, who told me to reach out to a travel nurse near me. I showed up for my appointment with a travel nurse who sat me down, started her presentation, and all I kept thinking was, this is gonna be expensive. She ran through malaria, meningitis, hepatitis A, typhoid fever, yellow fever, tetanus, the plague. Just kidding, but she was very thorough. Then she presented little travel bags that had things like mosquito repellent and anti-diarrhea medication. As she presented each item, I quickly searched them on Amazon, and they were cheaper on Amazon every time. In all fairness, it wasn't a hard sell, and the travel bags were thoughtfully put together, but it was a hard no. After scaring me to death as she walked through each potential illness and how my body would slowly and painfully disintegrate, I ended up saying yes to malaria, meningitis, hepatitis A, and typhoid. I learned that some diseases are more prevalent during certain times of the year, so that should be a factor into your decision about which vaccines to take. Another factor is where you're staying in Kenya. So for example, if I were going to visit some villages in some of the remote areas, I would have definitely considered the yellow fever vaccine. But because I was staying on the coast, that was not a factor for me. I was ready to schedule shots the next day, but she said, oh no, let's do them right now. Before I knew what was happening, I was loaded up with 3 shots. Luckily, there are pills for malaria. 19 minutes after I walked in, I walked out with sore arms and $674 later. All right, let's talk about packing. I don't know about you guys, but I've been working remotely since the beginning of the pandemic. What does that mean? It means I no longer own any presentable clothing. I may or may not have gained a few pounds, which means the clothes that I do own are a little bit dated and don't fit very well. And I know I am not the only one out there who wears pajama bottoms on Zoom calls. I went out and bought all new clothes for Kenya. New shoes, new swimsuits, new shirts, new pants, new everything. As you can see, I went with bright colors, lots of patterns, and as much linen as I could get my hands on. All right, let's talk about the beasts. I was so busy thinking about my trip that I completely forgot that I'm leaving for 3 weeks and I have no one to take care of my dogs. It is very expensive to board Java and Q's for 3 weeks, so I wanted a combination of boarding and family members taking care of the dogs. You've seen my Dalmatian video, and so you understand why some of my family is hesitant to take the dogs while I'm gone. How surprising that no one wants to have shedding Dalmatians in their homes. Everyone loves to look at and play with Dalmatians, but no one wants to have them stay over with all the shedding. Luckily, I was able to get a couple family members to house sit for 2 weeks, and then I boarded the dogs for 1 week. Java got away. What a surprise. That's a story for another day. And as a side note, some boarding facilities have asked that I not bring Java over anymore. Q's is fine, but Java is a no in some instances. Again, another Java story for another day. Caesar Milan, where are you? All right, now let's talk about the check-in process. I almost cried during the check-in process because everything that could go wrong did. My crew and I arrived at the airport 3 hours before our flight was set to leave. So we thought we had plenty of time. And we were some of the first people in line at the check-in counter. Apparently, the US is very behind other countries because they require printed documents for everything. Everything! How disappointing. I had electronic copies of my eVisas, my COVID vaccine card, and my recent negative COVID test. None were accepted. My crew needed to make a series of mad dashes to different floors in the airport trying to find a place that would print the eVisas, while I stayed back at the check-in counter and frantically tried to enter all our COVID vaccine information and recent negative COVID tests into 3 different websites that the check-in lady gave us. They even wanted to know which lab ran the COVID tests. Just so you know, I got my testing done at a bus on the side of the street in Brooklyn. Here I am trying to log into these websites, creating different accounts, getting the passwords that were emailed to us. All the while, the line behind me was dwindling. Not before long, I was the only person standing there. We ended up not being able to wait for the printed documents because of my flight's departure time. So the agent reluctantly accepted my e-visa after she had to email it to her manager because she was so confused that she didn't see the word approved on the e-visa. 30 minutes to go, and I still have to check my bags, get through a long line of TSA security, and get on the plane. But honestly, my heart really stopped when the conveyor belt taking the luggage to the airplane came to a screeching halt, and my luggage was not on it. The lady looked just as horrified as I did. Luckily, everything came together quickly. Her manager called back, said the visas were good to go. She put our luggage on the conveyor belt, and then she walked us to the front of the line of what normally is a 1 hour long security line and told us I could